All right, straight from my kitchen to your viewing area. Today I'm going to demo both the Inferno resin pads and the Alpha Polisher brushless polisher. Excited for this. Used this a couple of times on jobs and done some practice on this very slab here. Loving this machine so far. Can't wait to see how it lasts in the long term. One very impressive thing, it's a small thing, but I love it. This cord. Look at this cord. 25 feet long. Don't have to worry about accidentally unplugging extension cords. I've done that so many times. Just going along polishing, accidentally make a wrong step. There you go, your polisher is unplugged. This thing, not gonna have to worry about that near as much because you got it plugged in a wall up to 25 feet away. You don't have a extension cord sitting 3 feet away ready to be stepped on and unplugged. So, small thing, but absolutely love it. We'll use these Infernos. We've got the NSI snail lock system, like this quite a bit. Makes things much easier to change. This pad right here, or this backer pad, it's got this little hub right here, fits perfectly with the Infernos. They're designed to work together to keep these super rigid pads nice and centered. Very important. Super rigid pads, they take some practice. They take some getting used to make sure you can keep the machines nice and balanced because they are very unforgiving. But once you get it down, a game changer. Get such a better result than something with some flexibility. So we've got here my personal slab. Comes in handy for practice. I'm a big believer in practicing new tools before you go into the client's home and then practice. You need to know how to handle them, especially something as rigid as this, is these Inferno 2.0 pads. They're very rigid. They don't take tons of getting used to, but you got to know what you're doing. You don't just walk blindly in with something so rigid and expect great results. So this is in pretty good shape. I don't need to go as aggressive as I'm going to. I'm going to start with 120 grit. That is where I typically start for countertops. Floors, I typically start at 220, but there I have the advantage of some super heavy or much heavier equipment to help more efficiently grind the floor. Countertops, you got etches, you got fine scratches. I start at 120 almost every time. If I have deep scratches, I start with the 60 grit. Just go over the scratches themselves. Make sure to feather out wide so you don't have a distinctive dip in the countertop. Definitely you want to make sure you feather out nice and wide. It's a little tedious, but you don't want to have a finished product and show the clients a big old dip where their scratches used to be. Sure, the scratches are gone, but a dip can be just as annoying. But for the average etch marks, unless they're super severe, 120 is sufficient. Give it a few extra passes over the entire countertop, give it a nice smooth finish, and then continue on through the grits. So, I'm going to start by applying a good amount of water. You don't want this to dry out. Don't want to dry out the Infernos. They got to be used wet. More water, to a point, of course, but more water is going to help you out. They're going to cut better, more smoothly, and all in all, give you a much better scratch pattern to work with. The most important grit level, or the most important thing, in my opinion, for the finished result is where you start. If you skimp on the starting spot, or if you skimp on the starting point, your finished result is going to be lackluster. So you want to pay special attention to the first grit. I typically do more passes on the first grit than I do any others. So the first thing we're going to do is do the perimeter. We want to typically do 2 to 3 passes of the perimeter because they just don't get as many passes as the interior because you want to overlap. If you're doing it right, you're overlapping. That's going to give you a more consistent scratch pattern. So you want to pay special attention first off to those edges. And then I personally like to do overlapping fairly tight circular passes. There are different ways to go about it. You can go back and forth, back and forth. You can do figure eights. This is what I have become accustomed to doing, and it gets me good results. My good results may not transfer to your good results. Use a pattern that fits your style. So you can make sure we have the dial at the lowest setting. We don't want to go too high speed for these initial passes. We want to keep it nice and controlled. A little spritz. Let this get a little drier than perhaps I should have. Hopefully that won't be a problem, but we'll see after this. Want to make sure you get the edges really well. Make sure picking up any slurry off those edges, because these pads, being as rigid as they are, will pick up debris off the edges. So you want to make sure you're getting those. The slab, when I was doing some initial practice runs on my new Infernos, was having some issues. Talked to Cameron, mentioned that I should sand down these edges, give them a little bit of a bevel so this stuff doesn't pick up everything. This tile initially had very sharp edges, a little bit rough, so now they're a lot smoother, not picking up debris from the edges. But if you're doing a countertop, you want to make sure every time you're wiping up those edges so you don't introduce any artifacts that are going to cause you hassles down the road. So we got 120 grit done. Everything is so smooth I can't even see individual scratches. As this dries, it's getting a little bit light, as it should, being at 120 grit. I can't see an individual scratch anywhere. So nice and smooth. That's a good sign as we carry on. But we'll see how that impacts the final result. Next, on to 220 grit. If you value your fingernails, have on hand a big, wide putty knife. Makes things so much easier to remove these. So much easier. On to 220, get this nice and centered. The hub backer pad, great for keeping things nice and centered. You want to keep weight evenly distributed, especially when these are so rigid. So I've got one hub backer pad. Maybe you want one for every grit. If you're doing countertops day in, day out, you want to save some time and energy. Just have one backer pad for every single grit, and you're going to be changing these out super quick. I am not day in, day out doing countertops. One hub backer pad is good enough for me, and a good trusty putty knife. So now let's go on to 220. Get this nice and wet. Let it go a little bit drier than I should have last grit, so we're gonna try to compensate for that for here on out. 220, in my estimation, is basically your last restorative grit level. If you don't get any imperfections out with 220, you're not gonna get it out any later. So make sure 220 looks like it should. my opinion, the most important grit level to make sure it's right. So we're going to do again several passes on the perimeter and then tight overlapping passes back and forth. Starting to get a little dry. Get a few more spritzes of water on there for the final pass. All right, now squeegee it off. Not likely to see anything too impressive at this point. Really, you're not going to see any real reflections unless you get an eye level until about 800 grit. But this is the best grit level to make sure you've got all of the etch marks, make sure you've got all of the scratches, make sure everything is nice and even, no random 120 grit scratches that didn't come out. In my opinion, this is the most important grit level for the final product. So we're going to get this completely dry. I'm going to take a look at it at eye level and various angles just to make sure it's looking how it should. It feels soft and smooth, nice and even. Get down to eye level. I mean, you really got to get down to eye level to see a reflection at this point. Maybe if you have a big island with tons of natural light behind it, you don't have to get quite as eye level. But this situation in a kitchen, not great backlighting, small little slab, you got to get eye level. And everything is looking good, looking sharp. And on to the next grit. Next up is 400. So sometimes, like any pads, you get to using these and the numbers start wearing off on the back. I would highly encourage you to just have a quick little color code when you first get your Inferno set. Make sure you know which grit is which. You've got a nice little color band on each grit, different color for every grit. Before you get started and wear out those numbers, just make sure you have a little cheat sheet to make sure you know what grit is what. All right, same pattern, perimeter first, then the interior on 400 grit right now. Okay, take a look at the 400 results. Let's make sure everything is looking as it should. No random scratches. By now you should be seeing no individual scratches whatsoever. And I didn't happen to see any even at 120 grit. It's important to keep an eye out for that because it's happened to me. I didn't see anything at 120 grit. I didn't see anything at 220. Didn't see anything at 400. Then get to 800 and all of a sudden, oh, there's a problem. I need to start again. So just keep an eye out. Keep a careful eye. Make sure everything is progressing as it should. Feels even softer now to the touch. Don't have to get quite as eye level to see some manner of reflection. Not seeing any problems in that reflection at eye level. Sometimes 400 is a small or a hard grit to see any imperfections. In my experience, 800 is usually when you start seeing problems, if there are any. So just try to keep an eagle eye through each grit, make sure as best as you can. But it happens. Sometimes you got to redo because something didn't come out right. All comes down to how attentive you are in between each step to make sure it's where it should be. So I have found in most of the resins that I use, 800 and 1800 seem to dry up the quickest. I don't really know what the physics are behind that, but I use much more water on 800 and 1800 than any other grit level. Now we get into the high grits. 800 and above, those are the Inferno 2.0s. The earlier grits, 60 grit to 400 grit, those are the same as the original Infernos. If you still have a set of those, you don't need to replace those. These are still going to do just as great a job to prep it. The high grits, the 800, the 1800, 6000, and a 10,000, new to this series, new to the 2.0s. Those are what's going to make a difference far beyond the far beyond the original Infernos. This is where we're going to see a drastic difference in the final result. 800 in itself, you're going to start to see a reflection, but it's not going to be that impressive. 1800, that's when you're really going to start to see the difference, and you're going to know why you invested in those 2.0s. Squeegee off 800. Get those edges cleaned off good. And see what we've got. Dry microfiber towel to get those last little bit of residue off. Microfiber towels, my best friend for restoration work. Blow through a lot of them, but they get nice streak-free buffs. Love them, love them, love them. Okay, so got a pretty decent reflection after 800. That's surprising. Liking this a lot. And that's only 800. We've still got 3 steps to go. We are going to make this creme of Marfil look spectacular. And this alpha polisher, I can't get enough of this. It is so well balanced. I have used many times the industry standard. I think we all know what that is, and I think we all know the issues with it. It overheats. I do a lot of wet to dry polishing. I need to replace those machines as little as every 6 months. I got one high-end machine that has been outlasting those for sure, but it's just not that ergonomic. This machine, it is well balanced. It's got a weighted head, keeps the weight where you need it, nice and well balanced, and still smaller, more compact, and overall lighter weight than that quote-unquote industry standard. I think we have a new emerging industry standard with this alpha polisher. This is great, and I am so happy I got it. So now we're on to 1800. Again, going to use extra water on this one. Don't know what the reason is, but 800 and 1800 dry out quicker, and we don't want this to dry out. probably should invest in a pump sprayer or make this a lot easier, but I'm just accustomed to this type of sprayer. Not greatly efficient, but it's what I'm used to. So now 1800, do the perimeter, do the interior, squeegee it off and see how it looks. This should be where we see the biggest jump in the results. See how 1800 looks. Just dry this up. Hard to know for sure until it's completely dry. A little bit of excess moisture can really throw off the look of the results. So we've got nice sharp reflection. The reflections of those light bulbs clear as day, and we are only at 1800. Down to eye level, everything looks super sharp. Don't even need to get to eye level anymore. This angle right now, I can see those reflections and they are good and sharp, and we still got 2 grits to go. So excited to see how this finally ends up. Got 6,000. May sound like a big jump, but with these pads, they are designed to go from 1800 to 6,000. It's not a big jump for these pads. Some resins, yeah, that's a big jump. You're going to be missing some quality. These, it's what they're designed for, and it's going to get you the result you're looking for. So you notice me switch hands there in the middle of this pass. One thing about this Alpha, it's so well balanced. That's not something I'm having to do nearly as frequently as with other polishers I've used. Much more well balanced, much more easier to control. Still have to switch hands, of course, and you're going to get tired as you use one hand over the others, but I have found so far that I'm not switching nearly as often, and I personally would attribute that to how well balanced this machine is. All right, dry up 1800, or excuse me, dry up 6000. See how it looks. Oh, I'm getting good reflections already. I'm not sure if you can see it from that angle, but I'm looking virtually straight down and I can see the reflections from everything directly above this. And we still got 1 grit to go. So let's get to it. Get nice and centered. Can't say enough good things about this hub backer. Keeps everything nice and centered, super important for something so rigid. If you're using more flexible pads, you can eyeball it. not such a big deal. Rigid pads like this, you want it centered, and that hub backer pad makes that possible. Make sure we get nice and wet, lots of water. Not sure if it's just me, but I like to do a couple extra passes at a higher speed on the last grit, help it pop just a little bit more. Still, first the several exterior perimeter passes just to make sure we get those completely done. Okay, gonna make sure we have plenty of water for the last couple of passes. Don't want this to dry out. These are not meant to be run dry. You don't want to run them dry. This machine, top speed, dialed to 1 to 6. Top speed is 3,000 RPM. These last two passes, I'm gonna put it on 3 on the dial. So that's about 1,600 RPM. And we're gonna go top to bottom, bottom to top, and see what we come up with. All right, squeeze this off and take a look at what we have. Okay, get those edges. And a dry towel so we can see the final result without any smudges or streaking. A little spritz of water to aid in that. Sometimes the residue gets a little stuck where it's at and you need a little spritz to loosen it up. Not a big deal. And it is looking good. All right, so this is up to 10,000 grit with completely rigid pads. The Inferno 2.0s. This is a factory or better than factory polish and perfectly clear, flat, straight reflections. You can get a higher shine if you get into compounds. MB12, MB18, those are two of my favorites, can definitely get a higher shine. But what you're going to introduce is a little bit of orange peel. And nothing drastic, nothing that, oh my God, I need to redo this whole thing. Nothing that a client has ever in my life said, hey, there's some irregularities there. It is subtle, but it's there, and I see it. I have good eyesight, and I'm trained in this industry. I see that little orange peel. And this, there is nothing. So there is a little bit of resin smear. You're gonna see that some more in some stones than others. Sometimes you're just going to need to use a compound. There's no way around it. Some stones need the compound. This is looking great as it is. What we're going to do for that slight bit of resin smear is use a Pyro Gold pad, super high grit. Even though it is a DIP, it's not going to introduce any new orange peel because it is such a high grit. Even using compounds, you're not looking at an equivalent of starting with 200 grit DIPs and that kind of orange peel. Nothing like that, even with a compound. But this, perfectly straight reflections. And sometimes that can mean all the difference for your clients. You need to read your clients, know what they are looking for, and deliver. And this, if they want a perfectly sharp reflection Infernos from start to finish, it's going to deliver that. So let's go over it real quick with the gold pad. Not going to use the hub backer pad because this is flat. The hub is going to get in the way, so I have a regular 5-inch pad with the NSI snail lock system. It's a good system, nice and quick to change everything. So we got that 5-inch Pyro, gold pad, highest grit, and we're going to just clean up some of the minor issues that honestly most clients are not even going to see. I mean, we have trained eyes, we have much sharper eyes. Clients don't see what we see, but that doesn't mean we don't want to deliver the best we can deliver. They'll get it good and wet. So this step is not to add any gloss or anything like that. It's just to clean up any random resin smear. So I'm just going to go back and forth a couple of times and then dry it up. I'm not trying to pop a shine with this step because that is what the 10,000 grit has just done. Squeegee this off and see what we're left with. And there we have it. Start to finish with the Infernos. Started at 120, comes as low as 60 grit. There's really no need for that in this case. More often than not, 120 is my starting point. Finish it up with the gold Pyro pad, super high grit, just to get off any of the random resin smear. That can happen. Not going to see it on every stone. Some are going to be more prevalent than others, and honestly, sometimes you're just going to need a compound. Not all stones are going to get to the perfect reflection with just the Infernos. But the Infernos are going to give you a good start, and those final compounds are going to do much more work with much less effort than if you try to stop at 800 or 1800 and then get after it with the compounds. All right, there we go. Not sure what you can see from this angle, but I'm going to take some stills from some different angles so you can see the reflection that I got with this. Nice and smooth, super smooth, just like you want to deliver to your premium clients.